Christian, and it's like when you meet somebody that's a believer, you have that bond already, you know what I mean? It's like you've known him for a long time, so it was really cool, and because of that, even though I didn't win, I was happy for him, because he won. He won the competition. I mean, I thought he could show a few of his moves here, bust a few moves before, but most of you know Dan because of his work on television, and in fact, right now, I'll put in a little plug for him. They are voting, I think it's on, there's a website you can go to, danmarries.com. Is that right? Yeah. Go to danmarries.com, and you can vote for Dan, because they're voting for the newscaster of the year. All right. So I encourage you to do that. I think it's Tucson Foothills Magazine that's doing that. So I did that yesterday. I just encourage you to do that. Dan, come on up here and share with our group. Let's give him a warm up.
My name's Dan Marries, and I'm a Christian.
That's good. Good start.
Sometimes it's, working in the news business, you can't always just say that. So on my way here, and when Doug first asked me to come here, I was very, very excited. And nothing to be ashamed of by any means, but boy, in this day and age of political correctness, and it's magnified when you work in the news media, it's like you really can't wear your faith on your sleeve because you might offend somebody. So it's really my honor and pleasure to be here today. So what are you guys doing up so early? For a guy that usually goes to bed about 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning, wow, that alarm went off. I feel like I just closed my eyes and it was going off this morning. I set 3 alarms so I wouldn't oversleep. But really, thank you for letting me be here today. I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm very humbled to be here and honored to be here, and just good vibes. I mean, you all feel it in the room. I feel like the Spirit is here with us today. Well, coming right out of the chutes of the Bible, it stresses the importance of hard work, and I wanted to write this down so I wouldn't forget. Genesis 2:15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. Well, as business leaders, all of you know what it's like to work and take care of your business. You groom it, you'll see it grow, and it'll hopefully turn a profit, a really big profit. And when Doug asked me to do this, I immediately thought of a good friend of mine named Eric Sheffield. Everybody have heard of Sheffield's Diamonds? Yeah. Up there on Oracle Road. Eric and Jennifer, when they built their first store on Oracle, just north of Ina, right there above Cayos, he actually, in the wet concrete, wrote down John 3:16. And even though it got covered up by the carpet and everything, Eric always knew that John 3:16 was there. And he wanted his business built on a strong foundation. And so it started with the wet concrete, and as the walls went up. And ever since, his business continues to grow. I mean, he's actually just moved locations, and every year he's selling more and more diamonds. And he feels very blessed and grateful, and he always gives thanks to the Lord. And it's not just about, being profitable, but he's also selling love. He likes it. That's one of his lines. And he uses his business as a ministry. You think about it, people going in there to buy their diamond rings as they get engaged and all that good stuff. As a reporter, I've actually been accused many times of selling my soul to the devil. And the first time it ever happened, this was about probably 10 years ago. And I was working on a story where a 16 or 17-year-old teenager had been shot and killed. So the next day, went to the family's home. As we were getting out of the news unit, walking up the sidewalk, the neighbor comes out yelling, screaming, calling me every vulgarity in the book. And right as he walked away, he goes, "You're nothing but a sleazy reporter, and you've sold your soul to the devil." And I thought, wow, who is this guy? My first instinct was obviously to, be defensive. Like, hey, you have no business talking to me that way. I'm invited. They're expecting me. But there was, honestly, a little voice, something in my head said, you know what, don't say that. And it almost goes back to what Doug was just talking about, and you'll see why. So he turns around, goes into the room. I interview the mom and dad, talk about their son, and when the interview was wrapped up, I said, "Hey, what's up with your neighbor?" He came out, was very upset. Well, it turns out the neighbor had watched this boy grow since he was a baby, and the neighbor actually looked at the boy as a grandson. So, without me knowing it, that's why he was so upset. He thought I was a reporter showing up unannounced to try and ask his family, "How do you feel?" Well, obviously they feel horrible. So that moment, I think of that whenever I do a story. I always put myself in the victim's family's shoes. And that could have helped me any more than what it has in this last month and a half. As we all know what happened on January 8th, Our world came crashing down here in Tucson, but there's not a person in this room that's ever going to forget January 8th. And I mean, I was submerged in the story for 2 weeks straight, worked 2 weekends in a row, 12, 13, 14-hour days covering the story. And I've never had this kind of experience before because I know Congresswoman Giffords, I knew Gabe Zimmerman, I know Ron Barber, and it's like that for a lot of the folks in the media. And so that day, like many of you, I'm sure you'll remember where you were. I was at home. My mom was visiting from Colorado, and we were getting ready to figure out what we were going to do for the day. I wanted to show off Tucson for my mom. And I saw a Facebook posting from Wake Up Tucson. Joe Higgins and Chris had mentioned that she's going to be there. And I even told my mom, I was like, hey, Congresswoman Giffords is only about 4 miles from the house. And about a half hour later is when my phone started ringing, rushed into work, rushed to UMC, and I was there for the first press conference. And then that's where it all started. I mean, that's where we'd heard she died, and we heard she was still alive, and just the emotional roller coaster that I feel our city was on. And so that day, from pretty much 11 o'clock till midnight, 1 o'clock, I was at work, nonstop news, just completely submerged in the story. Next day, Sunday, go to church, and that's when I broke down for the first time in tears. I mean, it all finally caught up. I was kind of in work mode on Saturday, trying to get the story out there, try to be concise and all the journalism stuff. But Sunday is when Dan, the dad, came back, and I was in church with my mom and my wife and my son, and the tears just started rolling. And my pastor noticed that, and he came over after service, pulled me, my wife, and my mom to the side, went in his office, and he said a personal prayer for me. And right then and there, I mean, it was such a defining moment because I realized how important prayer is for all of us, but even at work and when you get stressed out and just things that you become so consumed with. I was very thankful for my pastor. It's Pastor Jeff Love at Alive Church. So that felt really, really good. And just to get that release, I felt cleansed and I was ready to go back to work. And as we all know, I mean, the next 2 weeks was just nothing but solid news. I got baptized probably about 4.5 years ago now it's been. But what changed all this was back in 2004, I made my first trip to Vietnam, my first trip, 3 trips to Vietnam. And, back in high school and college, more like high school, I was in DMLA, I was student council president, very active in my small town, Oklahoma. And, went to church with my grandma, my aunt and uncle, but then college came. Anybody else lose their walk in college? I lost my path, big time. If it feels good, do it. That was my slogan in school. And so that was kind of life for a while, and then got consumed with the career. Got reared back a little bit when my son was born 12 years ago, but still something was missing. And I found it in all places Vietnam. And I went back there with some Vietnam veterans, and it was a humanitarian mission, and also a mission of forgiveness for these guys, just trying to find closure to the war. It's about, making Vietnam a country, not a war. So I go there, and we do all sorts of humanitarian missions. We go to rest homes, we went to orphanages, schools for disabled children, all of these different entities where we were bringing things to help. And the most defining moment was when we would walk into these small villages. We had this big bus, 20 Americans on there, half of them veterans, the other half their families. And we'd pull in these little tiny villages where we'd walk in. And within about 5 minutes, we had literally every child in the village surrounding us. We had soccer balls, tennis balls, toothbrushes. I mean, the things that you and I take for granted, we wouldn't even think twice about throwing away, anything like that. They were so incredibly thankful. And they were so full of joy, so happy, smiles on their face. And I remember thinking, why are they so happy? They live in a hut thatch with a hut with a thatch roof with dirt floors. But it was because they have faith, hope, love, compassion. And I learned that very quickly. And it was all, 85% of the country is Buddhist. So, I wasn't prepared to become a Buddhist. I always had my Christian connections from my family. So I came home from that very first trip, planted a garden, and found a church. And that was, back in 2004. And ever since then, it still took me a few years to get baptized because I felt kind of hypocritical. I felt like I wasn't living good enough to become, to get baptized. And that all changed. And so now it's been about 4 years since that. And my wife is a very big supporter. We were very active in our church. it helps us. I mean, you know, they talk about faith in not only your life, but also your workplace. And it's so incredibly important. It helps me get through the day. And without it, I don't really know how I would have handled the last month and a half with all the things. I mean, not only did we have the January 8th shooting, but then we had the helicopter crash. The Pima County Sheriff's Department, the pilot killed, and my dad's a helicopter pilot, so that hits close to home. And then we had the deep freeze. Anybody's pipes burst? Seriously, Doug?
Yeah.
Did you not watch the news? We told you to cover your pipes. You know what's funny? Chuck George's pipes froze. They didn't break, but they froze. I was like, man, didn't you even listen to your own self? Chuck is our meteorologist. Things that, well, I kind of lost my train of thought because I wanted to tell you something about Vietnam. One of the things that, one of the guys, his name is Dr. John Fisher. He's a chiropractor, lives in Colorado, recently moved to South Carolina. And I'll never forget one of the things he told me while we were doing this trip, because I was there also doing a story. I did a half-hour documentary. I called it Back Behind the Bamboo Curtain, and it was all about the veterans finding self-forgiveness and trying to move forward with their life. But one of the things, what was so interesting about this trip was a lot of spiritual people on it. And a couple of the people were Buddhist, our translator, and then one of the veterans who actually picked it up while he was in Vietnam, and 30 years later he's still a Buddhist. And then we had one guy who used to be a former, was it a bishop in the Mormon church, and then Christians, and there was one other religion, Baha'i? Okay, wasn't real familiar with that one. So it was, some of the conversations we would have were just fascinating. Just the differences in the religions, differences in the culture. But at the end of the day, what I found so wonderful was we all always came together. And at the end of every day, we always had the highs and our lows. And what was our high for that day? What was our low for the day? And when it came to the end of the night, it didn't matter who was what. We all were in that same room, everybody shedding tears and just trying to find this peace within them. And it all happened. I mean, after those 2 weeks, every single veteran that I interviewed and talked with, one of them put it best when he said, before I came to Vietnam, I was a car teetering on the cliff with 4 flat tires. Well, I've got my flats changed, and now I'm heading down the road. And I thought that was, what a wonderful way to put it. And it was after 2 weeks in Vietnam. One of